I will go ahead and call the January 18th school board meeting to session. Tammy, please let the record show that all board members are in attendance, and Charles is being zoomed in with us tonight. Stephen, thank you for being here tonight, and you have the next few items for us.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. Tonight we want to introduce you to London Watkins. London, would you come forward, please? London is a 5th grade student at Mann Elementary School, and so I've got a few things to read from London's principal. She's a Mann student since kindergarten and currently in Mr. Post's class. The principal describes her as respectful and dependable. She has a great sense of humor, a strong work ethic, a positive attitude, and is charismatic and a natural leader and a friend to everyone. Tonight, London is supported by her family, including her mom, Tara, and her dad, Chad, as well as Principal Shelley Worley and other members of the Mann School community. If you're here representing and supporting London, would you please stand? All right. If you're able to stand with us, please do so. And London, whenever you're ready, we invite you to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And Dr. Lathan and Dr. Leonard, if you'd like to have your photo with London, that would be great. London, if you want to come over here.
I love your hair. I know, I love your hair. All your butterflies in your hair match your hair.
For tonight's Honoring Excellence, we are honored to recognize 3 of our principals. We'd like for them to come forward at this time. Mr. Blaine Broderick, Mrs. Amanda Dessa, and Dr. Crystal Majors. Would you please come forward? I'm going to read a little bit about each of them, and then we'll let them share a few words if they would like to. The Springfield region of the Missouri Association of Elementary School Principals has selected these 3 SPS principals as representatives for the 21-22 MAESP Distinguished Principals Program. The program chooses principals who demonstrate leadership that ensures Missouri's children acquire a sound foundation for lifelong learning and achievement. Principals will be recognized during MAESP's annual leadership conference in March. And we'll start with Dr. Crystal Majors. Crystal is principal at Sherwood Elementary School and has been selected as a distinguished principal. She leads her staff with high expectations and promotes the professional learning community's work with her teams. Crystal leads with a huge heart for her entire community and works diligently to remove barriers for all of her students to have the opportunity to be successful. Dr. Majors is creative and innovative when it comes to problem solving and celebrating her staff. She embraces challenges with a positive outlook and a can-do attitude. Dr. Majors, would you like to share anything with the board?
Nope, just thank you.
Nope.
Stephen, nothing prepared. This is the best job ever. Thank you for allowing us to serve. I think I speak. They've already told me they're not speaking. I'm speaking. I'll speak for all 3 of us. We're happy to have the opportunity to serve. We have the best. This is the best district, best kiddos. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for your leadership. Thank you.
Mrs. Amanda Dessa is principal at Williams Elementary School, and Mrs. Dessa has been selected as exemplary new principal. She's an advocate for students and families, and she strives to ensure that all of her staff and students feel loved and valued. She's a hard worker who appreciates challenges, approaches challenges, strategically. She has transformed Williams with high expectations for teaching and for learning. She has creative ideas for positive behavior rewards and for attendance incentives. And while her expectations are high, she brings levity and kindness to every situation. And then finally, Mr. Blaine Broderick is the school community liaison at McGregor Elementary School and has been selected as outstanding assistant principal. Mr. Broderick knows the importance of building relationships with students and never stops looking for ways to positively connect with them. You will see him working with basketball teams giving high fives in the hallway, and always modeling positive behavior. Mr. Broderick is invested in the students' academic and social emotional growth. He gives up much of his time to work after school and on the weekends to provide activities for students and their families. Congratulations on being recognized as outstanding leaders by the Springfield Association of Elementary Principals. Join us in congratulations. Congratulations. Tonight, we will continue with our Keep on Growing recognition. We have an exciting story to share from our Springfield Options site. Mr. Jared White.
Hi, my name is Jared White. I'm the at-risk title teacher here at the Springfield Options site. Springfield Options site is a school located on the campus of Great Circle. It's a residential facility for youth. We serve students K through 12 in individual classrooms. They stay here on campus. It's usually a high needs situation where the kids can come from difficult backgrounds, and we try to help them every step of the way.
Sometimes his intervention is just pulling them out of the classroom and shooting a few hoops with them while talking through, processing with them about their feelings, what upset them, and how they can regroup and regain and get back in the classroom and be successful. He's great about that.
I can put a stern look on my face, and without saying a whole lot, kids respond to just my presence. But really, I'm just a big softie. I have a lot of fun with the kids. My job here is so fun.
His role essentially is to provide social skills to our students. He helped build, and now we're utilizing our restorative justice framework where we implement 4 different levels. And so at different levels, he intervenes with teachers and students, and he supports those classrooms every day.
He can put value in these kids and value in their feelings. Sometimes they just need to be listened to, and they just need someone to be able to talk to. And he's great about doing that.
So I think it's really, really impactful and real and genuine. Sometimes we are the only support, the only routine, the only consistency they have.
He may have some students who need a little more instruction with some special attention, where he's focusing on more specific skills based on what behaviors a student may emit in the classroom.
I have a couple of classes each day where I lead a social skills lesson, and those lessons vary from making an introduction to making an apology to overcoming frustration to focusing on a certain task, anything social skills related that I know when I was growing up that wasn't really a focused subject. And so I think that's another opportunity that our students get that is very important in their lives.
He's irreplaceable. You know, that position is irreplaceable. That we need that person. Without him, I don't know what we would do.
Mr. Jared White, would you please come forward so we can present you with your recognition?
Sure. We have a very unique campus there. It's at the corner of Fort and Grand. There's quads that are there. I drove by it for 10 years before I even knew what it was, and I've spent the last 10 years there now. And the kids live there. They are high needs. We have incredible leadership in Mr. Simmons, who helps our teachers every step of the way and helps with our kids, is hands-on every day. People don't know that we're there, but we're doing a lot of really cool stuff there. So thank you so much for the honor, Mr. Simmons, and you guys for honoring us tonight. Thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
And we continue to have great stories shared with us by our principals and other department leaders, and we're sharing those on social media using the hashtag #GrowWithSPS. So we encourage you to continue watching for those. And that concludes tonight's Honoring Excellence. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you. Our next item of business is the approval of the agenda. The recommended action is that the board approve the agenda as presented. Somebody willing to make that motion?
So moved.
Sharita will make that motion. Denise will second it. And we are ready to vote. Is Charles voting by computer? Okay. Charles, are you voting by computer? Are you logged in?
Can't hear, he said.
Oh, he's got his vote. So he is. That's a yes. Okay. Okay. Oh, did I? No, it's come up. I think we're just waiting.
coming up.
We're just waiting. Oh. Did those come up? What did yours come up? You want to just say aye?
I'll just say aye.
Okay, Scott's an aye. Can you enter that, please? Okay, motion passes. Our next agenda item is public comments, and I will read our narrative. The Board of Education welcomes comments about issues being discussed. The board will use this time in our meeting to listen to the public, but will not comment or engage with the public during this meeting. The board allows up to 10 speakers per comment period. The board chair will call on individuals in the order in which they signed up. Substitutions are not permitted. Each speaker will be limited to 3 minutes and will be timed by the board secretary. Comments must be acceptable for a business and family-friendly environment. Inappropriate language, gestures, or personal attacks will not be tolerated. It is inappropriate to address the board about individual students or individual staff members by name in open meeting. If you have concerns about individuals, these concerns should be addressed through the appropriate administrative supervisors, either in the schools or in the district office. If you have materials that you want to share, please place them on the tray on the podium, and they will be distributed to board members following the meeting. We have 4 public speakers tonight. The first one is Jasmine Allen. Good evening, Jasmine.
Hi.
Welcome.
Where's the timer at again?
What'd you say?
Where's the timer at again?
It'll be right there. Yes.
Okay. I'd like to begin with saying thank you so much for the mask mandate for staff, and also for making that difficult decision that was needed to slow the spread. I'm going to talk today on 3 topics, including the bus expansion, world languages, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. So I've already emailed my concerns about the tiers, so I'm just going to reiterate, if we're going to deal with the 3 tiers, high school should be the latest tier. Both adolescents need the late start time. So as you're making up those things, please consider that both of them need a late start. Moving on, I know that your hands are tied because of that letter from our Attorney General, but I'm thankful that some continue to follow the guidelines. And I would like to reiterate, it is not political. I'm going to read to you now a letter, mass thing from St. Jude. Okay, so no child should die in the dawn of life. That belief started St. Jude Children's Research Hospital, where I've worked for the past 35 years. It is a promise for children that has galvanized the world regardless of political background or political affiliation. It is a dream that we all can share. So why now are we debating whether or not children should be protected amid a raging pandemic that has killed more than 600,000? I believe it's actually 800,000 now in the U.S. alone. As a physician, scientist, and president and CEO of St. Jude, I'm compelled to speak up for the evidence-based medicine, science, and the future of children. The data is clear. COVID-19 is raging in our community. So I appreciate your leadership for taking the necessary steps to protect our students and staff. I'm also a teacher and a parent of a Springfield Public School student. Now moving on to world languages. World languages are a gift, and that it should not just be the privileged that have access to that. So that's actually tied to diversity, equity, and inclusion, as if only the privileged are getting access to world languages. So an exposure at a young age helps with language development. So I urge you to look into your resources, see how we can get world language going. Now, moving on to diversity and equity. I was able to participate in the Diversity Institute at Missouri State, and I'm hoping in building belonging. I cannot tell you how much I have learned from those programs, and it's And I'm thankful for Dr. Garcia and all the work she has done. And so I'm asking, when are we going to get back to doing the work? Our children deserve it, right? I can't tell you how many times a world language student that's traveling here have been told, go back to your country, learn English. We're living in 2022. We must do better. We have to continue growing. So I'm asking you, when are we going to begin our diversity, equity, and inclusion training? Thank you so much for your time and your service. You guys have a good day.
Thank you, Jasmine. Our next public speaker is Laura Durnan. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Laura Durnan. I'm a French teacher at Central High School. I'm here today on behalf of SPS foreign language teachers to express the need for funding to support student learning in our language program. Over the past several weeks, we've heard messages highlighting economic, academic, social, cultural impact that world languages have on our students and our community. We have learned about the loss of middle school programs and a reduction of language teachers and the effect it has had on enrollment throughout the district. In the last decade, our department and programs have been dismantled and our budget has been neglected. The current budget for the entirety of SPS World Language Department, including its 28 teachers and approximately 3,500 language students, is $4,800. This is money designated for supplies, supplemental materials, and travel expenses to attending professional conferences. Dispersing these funds equally among staff and students averages out to about $171 per classroom, or $1.37 per student. To put this into perspective, it costs anywhere from $900 to $1,300 for one teacher to attend a professional learning conference. Imagine the challenges of improving one's skills without the benefit or support of professional learning. This is the reality facing world language classrooms throughout the district. In comparing the SPS World Language budget with those of area school districts, the investment made by Springfield Public Schools is merely a fraction of what is needed to ensure program success. For example, the Republic School District, with 4 teachers and approximately 450 language students, invests about $5,000 a year in its World Language Department. This averages out to $1,250 per classroom, or $11 per student. Nixa Public Schools, with 6 teachers and approximately 500 language students, invest about $4,000 in this World Language program, which is about $675 per classroom, or $8 a student. SPS World Language Department recently submitted a budget proposal that I'm leading here tonight. It would increase funding for more closely to reflect the investment made by area schools. It would allocate $200 for each language teacher to purchase supplemental materials for their students in classrooms, improve funding for teachers, attend professional conferences, and provide an on-site professional workshop for all SPS World Language teachers. This would increase the district's per pupil spending from $137 to a little over $10, and more appropriately align with other area school districts. I appreciate your time and your consideration. Like I said, the proposal that I think we have some more copies of it right here. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Laura. Our next public speaker is Kyler Sherman Wilkins. Welcome, Kyler. Good evening.
Yeah, good evening. Happy New Year.
Yes.
My name is Kyler Sherman Wilkins. I come to you as a advocate and strong supporter of public schools more broadly, but specifically SPS. I'm also a sociologist at Missouri State University, and I remain committed to the diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts of the district. I want to start off by just thanking all of you for your service. This is oftentimes a thankless job, and so I just want you to know that you are seen and appreciated, everyone here. So I just wanted to name that, especially during these challenging times. So thank you for your leadership. I want to speak specifically about some concerns that I have about 2 bills that are moving in the pipeline. This is House Bill 1474 and House Bill 1995, also known as the Parents' Bill of Rights. And I don't want to be as presumptuous and feel like I'm educating folks on what public education actually is, but given some of the comments that come from people and some of the views that people on the board might hold, I think it's time to take a step back and understand what public school is all about and why these bills are actually really harmful to our school system. The Parents' Bill of Rights essentially posits that parents should be the sole deciders of what happens when it comes to their kids' public education, and that's mistaken for a number of reasons. So just a little bit of history. Following the American Revolution, is actually Thomas Jefferson who, and other founding fathers, began pushing for publicly funded schools. Even though it was initially defeated when it first was proposed, it did become a thing, and over the next couple of 100 years, rather, it became more broadly accessible to Americans. And they specifically noted that it was really important of having a well-educated citizenry that could ensure the longevity of the fledgling nation. And so since its inception, public education was never merely about teaching the basics of reading, writing, and arithmetic. It never was solely about that, as many people tend to tout today. Instead, public education was intended to provide young people with the skills and knowledge needed to be active and engaged citizens in United States society. More recently, public schooling has also taken on the goal of unifying a population that is becoming increasingly diverse, and also granting all students equal opportunities, which includes validation of historically excluded group members' lived experiences. And unfortunately, the language in the bills that I mentioned before, by allowing parents to, in effect, dictate what their children are exposed to in public schools, they not only take away power from the teacher, but they also stifle the ability for children to be exposed to diverse perspectives that will only serve to help them grow into culturally competent, well-adjusted citizens in an increasingly diverse community. Now, parents are and should be an integral part of their child's public education, to be sure. They should be partners and eager collaborators of public school teachers and staff, but we have to let our teachers teach and our students learn. And we must work to rebuild the trust between our public schools and our parents in order for that to happen, and I would love the opportunity to help and partner with the school district to make that a reality. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kyler. Our next public speaker is Aaron Gray. Welcome, Aaron. Good evening.
Good evening. I am the parent of a Field fourth grader, and so first and foremost, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and dedication. She attends an amazing school. We've been very lucky since she's been there since kindergarten to have such wonderful teachers, wonderful principal. But unfortunately, with our COVID environment in the community, we are still clearing some hurdles. So first, I want to say it was very important to us as Field parents to see the update about the staff mask requirement. I think this is a huge step that we needed to see. Our kiddo was one of probably a couple hundred last week who, was on voluntary quarantine because of multiple direct exposures. And as parents, to protect her teacher and her fellow students, we kept her home for a couple days. We know we didn't have to do that. Unfortunately, the feedback that we're getting from our public health leaders is that we haven't seen a peak yet. And we probably will see a peak maybe in next week or the week after. My concern as a parent right now is I appreciate that we have made the move to close the schools and offices until next Monday based on our teacher and staff shortages. However, that still doesn't address the student mitigation side. So from that scenario, I still might have a child going back to her school on Monday, and again, kids aren't masked. We're still going to see this transmission going on. It's not going to stop just because the staff members and visitors are wearing masks. So I'm going to make two requests, one of which is probably going to be possibly unwelcome. The first request is just that we as SBS parents fully support closures that you have to make based on staffing shortages. It's not very helpful to us as parents to keep tossing our kiddos into classrooms that just aren't staffed the way that they need to be. So we hope that you will feel confident in extending whatever you need to do as far as the school closure. And that makes me very sad because I want my child in the classroom. The second request I would make is that there would be a consideration from this board for a very temporary student mask mandate. And I mean temporary as in maybe till February 4th, maybe until February 11th, because I think that this surge that we're seeing right now, we're going to continue to see for at least another week or two following. And I fear that if we don't add that, we're just going to put ourselves in the same situation again and again. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin. That concludes our public comment speakers at this time, and we will move on to our next agenda item. Our next agenda item is our consent items, and Dr. Mulford will come to the podium at this time.
Good evening, school board. So we didn't have a study session this month, so you may have some questions regarding the consent agenda items. If you do, we'll do our best to answer them. I do want to point out under the personnel consent portion, we did catch today on the early separations a couple of names that were missing, and also an administrator that was under teachers instead of under administrators. So that has been fixed and updated in your packet. But other than that, what questions do you have on consent?
Any questions for Dr. Mulford at this time? And Charles, does he have the ability to talk?
Let's do it on mute. You should
Okay,
put it on
all right.
mute.
I just was curious. Okay.
I just have a comment.
Yes.
I just want to say it's unbelievable that I sent you basically a barrage of this, and that you got back with me, I think, in like, what, an hour? And answered every single one.
Well, I appreciate that, and it was easy to answer because it was just simply an error on there that we got fixed. So I appreciate you pointing it out.
No, it's more than this. It's several items and others. So I just want to say thank you, because
I'll credit Dr. Cooper for getting that turned around so quickly.
And oftentimes people don't know when we have combined sessions like this that we are asking questions, and so it's good to.
yeah, but with the holiday and
Just, yep. Okay, seeing no other questions at this time, I'll go ahead and read the recommended action is that the board approve consent agenda items 3.01 through 5.01. Would somebody be willing to make that motion? Scott will make the motion. Danielle will second it. Any discussion? Seeing none, we are ready to vote.
Aye.
He's an aye. Amy, he's an aye. We'll get this fixed. Motion passes. Our next agenda item is our treasurer report with Dr. Mulford.
All right, so if you look at the projected ending fund balance, not much has changed since last month. Went up slightly, but again, that's a moving target. We are just now entering the legislative session, so one thing we're really keeping an eye on is the appropriation of ESSER 3 funds. So I do want to remind the board, at this point in time, the state legislature has not appropriated ESSER 3 funds. They have until the middle of March to do so, or those funds are returned to the federal government. So if they fail, and there is some legislators that do not want to appropriate the funds, and if they fail to do so, that means Springfield Public Schools alone will miss out on $60 million, most of which is dedicated towards additional support positions within our district. So this is a topic that's very high on our priority list that we're following closely. The other thing I want to point out in your treasurer's report is the ESSER 2 report. Those are, again, our estimates based on the budget that was allowed. I do want to point out, again, a discrepancy that has been fixed and re-uploaded. But if you look at the very far right column, okay, that says in process. So that is supposed to be the difference between what has been actually spent, so the column to its left, and what we expect to spend the remainder of the year. Okay, so it now reflects that way, but when it first went out, it did not. So that has been corrected and re-uploaded in your packet. So with that, we'll take any questions that you might have. Again, I'll credit Ms. Stasel for getting that turned around so quickly.
Any questions for Dr. Milford at this time? Thank you for the reminder of the adjustments and also for the legislative action to be aware of. At this time, the recommended action is that the board approves the treasurer's report as presented. Would somebody be willing to make that motion? Danielle will make the motion. Is there a second? Sharita will second it. Any discussion? Seeing none, we are ready to vote. Motion passes. Our next agenda item under information reports is our COVID-19 update with Dr. Lathan.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. Just want to share with you, of course, since Friday's published agenda, several things have changed for our district as it relates to COVID. So just want to make sure that the information that was shared with board members today, also our staff members and parents, that everyone is up to date. So on Friday, this past Friday, 20% of our workforce and 19% of our student body were absent. Last week, we had a total of 863 COVID-19 cases in the district. Today alone, we had a total of 300 cases, 200 students testing positive, 100 staff members today. So last week's total was 863. Today's total alone was 300, basically. 200 for students, 100 for staff. As a result of the staffing and substitute shortage, this afternoon we communicated to parents and staff that we're closing the district for the rest of the week. All in-person and live virtual instruction are canceled, and employees are encouraged to refrain from working on site so that we can clean all of our facilities. In addition, we're requiring all SPS employees and visitors, when they return on Monday, to wear masks until February the 4th. So we reinstituted mandated masking for employees and visitors to all of our facilities. On February 4th, we will reevaluate that, just based on information that we are receiving from various health officials as it relates to this peak in the Omicron virus. Also, we will continue, our testing sites will remain open for symptomatic staff for the remainder of this week. Our testing site at Studi is for symptomatic staff members only. We are waiting for another arrival or test to come in from DESE, so we're utilizing the remaining supply for symptomatic staff. The goal is to get our staff members well so they can be back on campus and be able to educate our students. We will also be providing grab-and-go meals for our students. That information went out to parents today. We will start distributing those meals tomorrow. There is a sign-up for parents to sign up, so we'll know how many grab-and-go meals to prepare. Students will receive 5 days worth of meals, so we want to make sure our students and staff are covered there. During this surge, it is important that every individual practice social distancing, wear a mask in public settings, monitor symptoms, and get a COVID-19 vaccine or booster shot. We're just hoping that these measures will help so that we can once again return to in-person learning and that we can keep our staff members and students safe. At this time, board members, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns that you'd like to share.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lathan. At this time, if there are questions or comments that board members would like to share, this is the time for that.
Charles go first since he's online, because we can't see him. What do y'all think?
Okay.
If he has anything, is that okay?
Yeah, yes, that's right. Charles?
Is he online? Does he say anything?
We can't hear him.
Oh, we can't hear him.
Yeah. Does he have to unmute?
How do we do that? I have no idea.
This is absolutely surreal.
That's right. We can hear you now. Oh, we're gonna get. Can you put the mic with those two?
You can hear me okay?
No. Hold on just a second. Thank you, Pam.
This actually feels like max headroom for those of a certain age. You will remember that.
Okay, Charles, we can hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes. Oh, okay. I'm guessing I'm not the only one who probably has comments, questions on this. First thing I would want to say is, Dr. Latham, thank you for, I think, making what was a difficult but a principled and I think a smart call to suspend operations for the next 3 days. I mean, we're in the midst of an unprecedented surge, with apologies for using unprecedented, as we all do. And we've got to take care of our people. The one thing I would observe is I would strongly recommend that by board action, perhaps not tonight, maybe in a special meeting, we extend to the same expiration date as the masking mandate for employees and visitors to include students. I think it's absolutely true that a masking mandate is not entirely enforceable. It is not a silver bullet, but its beneficial impact is certainly not zero. I don't know if we'd had the full masking mandate, we would have avoided the closure. I rather doubt it because there are a lot of districts in both situations. I realize there are potential legal implications to that. At the end of the day, and some of you know, I'm an insomniac to start with, and I can lose sleep over a lot of things. But if I'm going to lose sleep, I would much rather lose sleep over the potential of being sued again for implementing the mask mandate because we think it's the right thing to do for a limited period of time, than I would leaving something on the table that could have materially had a beneficial impact for the health and well-being of our students, our teachers, our staff, and in a broader level, frankly, our community, because we've got a healthcare community that is stressed to the breaking point, and anything we can do to move the needle back in a positive direction is something I believe this board can, should, and ought to do.
Thank you, Charles, for your comments. Any other comments or questions at this time for Dr. Latham?
I have some comments, and I'm with Charles in that I believe this board needs to look at potentially reinstituting a masking mandate for our students. We all know, and Dr. Latham, you mentioned, there's been a surge of COVID cases since the return of our students. Just about 20% of our staff was off on Friday. That's 700 employees. Nearly 20% of our students were out on Friday. That's 4,800 actual students. And thank you for that information that on Friday we had 131 unfilled teacher and aide substitute requests. That's people who are out that we don't have a sub to fill in that classroom. These absences are not sustainable for in-person classes. They stress our staff out, they stress our parents, they stress our teachers, they stress our students. From custodians to food service employees that are being asked to fill and cover their missing coworkers' spots. The situation has culminated in today's announcement that we will not be having any classes for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. And I think all of us agree that for most students, in-person classes are a priority, and we need to have that. I know we are also limited in the number of virtual hours that we can have based on what our friends at Jefferson City have provided for us. It's not sustainable. And I also recognize that opinions regarding a masking reinstatement vary greatly in our community. 7 of us, though, have been tasked with a difficult decision, and it has a direct impact on the safety of our students and staff. None of us are immune to the views and opinions of our fellow community members. Our decisions affect the community, and I know none of us take that lightly. I think all of us have been contacted by teachers and parents with the concern of the COVID surge just this past week. I know I work and live beside those who disagree with a masking mandate. Some of my friends on the board I know disagree with a masking mandate, but I also know that we've got a responsibility to our teachers and our staff. And Charles, as you mentioned, this is not a silver bullet. Masking is not going to completely stop COVID, but it is certainly a tool in our toolbox. And I think we need to be using that tool in order to have in-person classes. I also recognize that Missouri State is masked, OTC is masked, Drury is masked, our county courthouse is masked, and the Springfield Greene County Health Department has recommended to us that our students also be masked. I know also, Charles, as you mentioned, our state attorney general has threatened with a lawsuit, and I threatened all districts with a lawsuit if we reinstitute masking for our students. Being the largest school district in the state, I know that we've got a giant target on our back, but I also hesitate to make a decision regarding safety based on a potential lawsuit that may or may not be successful. I would prefer, that we protect our students and our staff and have masks so that we can have in-person classes. Masking is not going to stop all the COVID problems. Like I said, it's a tool in our toolbox. We've got to ensure that we've got in-person learning. I understand and appreciate nobody wants to wear a mask. I understand and appreciate that this decision may not be popular, but I do believe it's the right decision right now. And I would support a motion, whether it be now or in the future, to reinstitute masking for our students, at least till February 4th, so that we can see if that has an impact on our COVID numbers. But this is not something that we can just ignore and bury our heads in the sand.
Thank you, Danielle. Any other comments or questions for Dr. Lathan at this time?
I have a comment. I'm also in favor of reinstating a masking mandate. We're right now saying, I know that we're short tests for symptomatic folks, but without student and asymptomatic folks being able to get tested for COVID, we are begging for continued climbing of COVID cases, where we're going to, especially without masking. So without masking, we're going to have people who are asymptomatic still coming to campus, and students who are going to continue to respread and reinfect the community of students in our buildings. And so without masking, we are not providing students with much mitigation other than the teachers, which isn't enough, I think, to protect our students. We got a very interesting email from a patron who wanted to know to what end would the lawsuit, what would be the cost, what would be the impact of the lawsuit if we were sued by the Attorney General? And I think that's a good question. And this is a question for our discussion. I don't know that I have the answer to this, but my understanding is that to what end is that we would be forced to comply with not masking and or to remove our masking mandate, and then that the biggest impact would be the fees that it will cost. And I know that cost is something that we have to be concerned with, but for me, the safety and health of our children, our families, our teachers is more important than the cost that will be associated with legal fees.
Okay, thank you, Sharita. Any other comments or questions at this time? Okay, Scott?
One thing I want to let you know that I'm not in favor of reinstating masking. I understand your points, and they're good points. We have responsibilities to teachers, staff, and students, and it's a tool in the toolbox. The tool is a choice, though. We have the Attorney General lawsuit threat, which is very concerning. Another lawsuit that actually may have been thrown out. The city has done that. Many employers are requiring their employees to be masked. I just think masking should be a choice. That doesn't mean that they're not allowing them to mask. They can still mask. And if you've gone in and there was the masking mandate and gone into high school, or any school for that matter, it's been tough for the teachers and staff to enforce it. And not always on. A lot of times for their chin wars. And I agree it's a tool in the toolbox, but it's got to be a choice for that tool.
All right, thank you, Scott. Any other comments or questions at this time?
I did have one quick question, and I don't know if SPS has ordered a bunch of N95 masks. Is that correct?
We delivered KN95 masks today. If I'm saying yes, we delivered them to all of our sites today.
They are available for staff.
They're available for staff as we receive, and then we have other orders coming in, but we have enough for all staff members right now.
Thank you. Do you want me to go or you want to wait? Or?
That's fine. I just have a question about virtual learning hours, but go ahead. Yeah. I have a question about the, I know we're getting an echo here. Why don't we mute that?
Let me move this and see if that'll help.
Yeah.
Do that help?
Is that better?
Yeah.
No, it's still there.
Charles.
Can we mute that on the laptop?
We might need to move Charles.
Or just mute him.
Charles, we have to move you.
I think we're just going to mute him right here. Can he hear us then?
Or just move
But he
him.
won't be able to hear us, right?
He should be able to hear us through Zoom.
Turn this down.
Right?
Yeah, he should be able to hear us.
Yeah. Stephen. Yeah, you can put that one back, that's fine. She's gonna put that back, that should help right there. Don't do anything else. Just move it over.
No, never mind. Put that back.
I know.
Right, Charles.
Needs to talk again.
Okay.
Okay. My question is, so we're closing the school district for 3 days, and that's essentially like it's a snow day, if you will, using that type of strategy. I know there's still snow on the ground, but there seems to be the question of how many virtual hours are we allowed this year, and that's just to help explain, to remind me and to remind us again what that looks like. And then, is there any discussion at the, I don't know if it's at the state level, that there would be the ability to extend the number of hours to be virtual, given the circumstances that our schools find themselves in?
Okay. We'll, Dr. Mulver, come up. Okay. So there are a certain number of hours, so we'll talk about that.
Okay.
But we have two different things going on right now, how we're treating the next
Right.
couple of days as snow days, and then if we needed to move into a virtual format. Okay, okay.
Okay.
Can you hear us now, Charles?
They want to hear us.
Charles, can you hear? I think you're muted.
I heard that.
Of course.
Okay. 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 All right. We just got to deal with it.
Okay, all right, we'll just deal with it. Okay, so,
Okay, so-
two-part question.
Got it. So just some quick history. All right, so used to in Missouri, districts had to have a minimum of 1,044 hours and 174 days built into their school calendar. About 2 or 3 years ago, legislation was passed that did away with the minimum number of day requirement and just changed it to the 1,044, hours. So when they made that change, they also changed the way schools make up time missed to inclement weather from days to hours. And that change is 60 hours. You have to make up a total of 60 hours. The first 36, and then half of the next 48. So half
Say that again.
Say that one more
you
time.
make up the first 36 hours missed, hour for hour. Then you make up half of the next 48 hours. So for every 2 hours you miss, you make up 1. Turns out to be a maximum of 60 hours. Anything beyond that is forgiven. Okay? So with that, they changed the way that schools can deliver instruction and still claim ADA attendance, where they allowed for 36 hours of alternate methods of instruction, or AMI is the acronym we use, to be used. Now, that was intended for inclement weather. However, with COVID hitting, basically the state has said you can use those 36 AMI hours for any reason that you're out of school. But by state statute, we're limited to 36 hours. Okay? And last year they did what was called the AMI X, and that was if you had to flip to virtual, and you could claim attendance under that method. That was done away with at the start of the school year. So if we flip to virtual, we are limited to 36 hours of ADA that we can claim, and any virtual learning beyond that is just, we don't get to claim it. So we have to make those days up if we dip below 1,044 hours in our calendar. Now, individually, for an individual student who's positive, then we treat that as a homebound situation. So we can still claim ADA as long as they're staying up with their work. All right. So with that said, when you look at our calendar, we have about 60 hours extra built into our calendar. And when you take that, you add the 36 hours of AMI, we could essentially miss a total of about 16 days of school, as long as 6 of those are AMI days, and still not have to add days to our calendar. But if we go beyond that, we'll have to add those days back in, whether it's at the end of the year, President's Day, spring break, somewhere Saturdays, somewhere along the lines, we've got to add it back in to get to the 1,044.
And I also just note, thank you for that, I appreciate that, just as a person who teaches, that flipping to online is not as easy as switching a button. That it still requires teachers have to have time to prepare to switch to online learning. It's not just, and we have teachers out, and I don't know what degree they're sick, but when they're out, they may or may not be able to teach still. And so
that's why we're going to the complete shutdown for the next.
I understand
people
that, yes.
are not well enough to teach even virtually right now.
Right.
That is, those are two main reasons. Number one, you can't flip a switch. I know you see a number of smaller districts saying immediately to AMI. It takes time. We will be ready if we need to move to AMI, but we have to get our teachers prepared. We have to get our parents and students prepared. We also have a contingency plan for parents and students that cannot get online or they don't have the assistance. I mean, a lot of people it's easy, but it's not as easy, especially for our younger children. So we're making plans and we'll be ready if we need to move to in that direction.
And along those lines, when you talk about all that work that goes into planning,
yes,
we're a maximum of 6 days. That's the most we can do, right? So that's why we're not quick to pull the trigger as well. But you hit the nail on the head, and Dr. Holt made that comment earlier today. Why would we go AMI when a good part of our people aren't well enough to teach, right? Let's get them well, get them back here.
Mm-hmm. And so you said 16 days total of school can be missed. And can you remind us how many days we've already missed as of today, plus 3 this week? So as of Saturday, where will we be?
We'll have 5 days missed.
Okay.
But we're at this point adding 2 of those to that last week of school. If you recall, we have the last day of school is the 27th, Jay. Originally, it was the 23rd, but for the first 4 days we miss, we can tack them on to the end of the year. So we missed 2 snow days, we added them to the end for 25th. To be determined if we add any more to the end of the year, but we have 2 more sitting there that we can add on, which essentially gives us 20 days, if you want to look at it that way, because we have those 4 in that last week.
And we've already added on to the end of the calendar?
Well, not officially, unofficially.
Which is why when we approved the calendar, it said tentative ending date.
Yes.
Okay.
But you plan on adding them even if we don't have, let's say, more snow days or more
shutdown days?
Not unless we have to.
So it's not a guarantee that it's going to be added?
Right, it's only if we are required to do so.
The 2 days, we're already saying that we're going to recommend the 2.
You are doing
Beyond that, we
recommending.
That won't come to you till April. That's it.
Oh, okay.
But we need to try to get through
the winter
months and see what happens.
Okay.
But it would not impact.
The wild card here is inclement weather.
Yeah.
We just don't know how many days we're going to
It's
miss.
so hard to predict that. So hard. Okay.
Good news is I heard there's a chance of snow and freezing rain tomorrow, so it may work out.
So, and so there's no other emergency discussion of allowing additional virtual learning?
You're not hearing a single word. And we believe, personal opinion, that it's because they don't want schools to flip to virtual. They want them to be in person, right? which we get. We all want to be in person. I do know our teachers' organizations are pushing for additional hours, but no conversation right now.
But it's also hard to be in person when 20% of your staff is gone.
For sure.
There's lots of different angles to look at this. That's why it's complicated or
And what-
complex.
Now, I do want to just put out there what really made today hard was the unavailability of subs because they were also sick. And that's what we heard from PenMac, our substitute provider.
And I know you guys worked quickly. I know some parents were frustrated at announcing today for tomorrow being off, but I know that you guys were working very quickly to make sure that everything was in place so that that could be done and making sure meals were provided to students who needed those. So I appreciate that very much.
Thank you. And as you pointed out, I think it's important not only to share with the board, but also the public that it is a process to get to the point of making an announcement, even an announcement about masking, an announcement about closing school. We don't just do it on a whim. We are constantly looking at numbers, reviewing information. There's an emergency phone call that we get online with the health department, and want to thank them because they drop everything for SPS anytime we call on them. And so there is a process. There's a process on messaging, because not only do we need to, number one, first inform the board, we have another leadership team of about 80 people we need to speak with and share with them. We go through that process of holding a meeting. We answer questions. Sometimes they give us ideas of, have you thought about it like this? And so there's a process. So after that call with leadership, then we're reviewing our messaging again, because we do ask for our attorney's input on messaging. So we have to wait for our attorney to review that, get back, and then those messages start going out. So it does take a day for things to happen, but we monitor the absence report or the field rate report. We monitor that over the weekend, so it's just not dropping everything and walking away. And we had a wonderful, I know that's under my superintendent's update, but we had a wonderful Bass Pro tournament this weekend, but a number of us that you might have saw us at the game, but when you didn't see us, we were somewhere in a room looking at information and reports and working on calls. So please know that that continues. We don't want to close school. I'll tell you, that's a last resort for me, but we don't have a choice at this point, and we do need our staff members to be well. Our nurses have been out. We have a number of our nurses out also, so it's heartbreaking right now what we're going through as not only as a community, but as a country and as in the world, I guess you say. So.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. And can you clarify that when we talk about people being sick or out, people could be sick and out because they're sick and not even
yes.
COVID, right?
Not even COVID,
so
yes.
is that, when you look at the numbers?
It could be COVID, it could be taken care of, they could have just medical appointments, they could be taking care of a sick child, or sick spouse or partner. So I mean, it varies of the reasons. And then some of the positions require subs, some do not require subs. So we look at that, and also we're able to pull that out.
Thank you, that's helpful. Any other questions or comments for Dr. Lathan? Miriam?
I just want to make a comment to bring a different perspective, and I certainly appreciate everyone. Can you see me?
I can't.
You can't?
Can we pull Charles down a little bit and move him?
Stanley
Sorry,
here.
Charles.
Can we put him in a seat?
Yeah, put him in a seat.
Here, Charles, let Charles in his seat.
There you go. I appreciate everyone's comment. This is really loud. I'm going to put it over here. And I know the issue of choice has been brought up, and that the city, there's not a citywide mask mandate. So I think that the fundamental way I look at this, and I'm coming at it as a medical person, so not what people are telling me, because people are very polarized on this issue. And if I had to go out there and take a poll, it would be 50-50. So I'm completely disengaging that and just coming at you from a quote-unquote scientific aspect. So I think the fundamental question we have to ask is, what are we trying to achieve? Like, what's the end game? What's the goal? And if our goal, and I know this Charles kind of brought this up, which is on the whole, for the sake of the community, that's just, we're going to have to give that up, because this idea that we're going to mask the least vulnerable to protect the more vulnerable is just not how our society functions. We don't put, we don't forgo what is good for our children for the sake of the community. That's not how we work. So I think the answer to that question is what we're trying to achieve and whose safety we're concerned with is the children. And I think without a question, all of us agree that that is foremost as board members for us, that we want the health and safety of the children. So I want to come at it from that perspective. Okay, so it's been said that it's a tool in our toolbox. It's not a silver bullet, a magic bullet. Okay, it's not a bullet, and it's not a tool. That's the problem we have, and that's the thing I think we need to acknowledge, because it's a cost-benefit ratio. What's harmful to the kids? And you just can't get away, and I jotted these notes. These are very recent. We all know that if you have even an unvaccinated teenager will do better than a vaccinated person twice their age. That's just a generality put out there. But to put numbers on it, we had, for kids 0 to 17, we had 710 COVID deaths from the beginning of the pandemic. So from January of 2020 to 2022. But the overall deaths from other causes is 67,000. To put it in perspective, I won't go into the numbers on flu, but it's less than our two typical flu seasons combined. So having put that in perspective, then we have to consider it's not a tool because we know we have a problem with fidelity in our schools, and they range at different schools. We know that cloth masks are not effective. I know the science is evolving, but the science on cloth masks is not evolving. It is very well established. It's great if you're going through the halls. It's great if somebody sneezes on you, if you're at the grocery store. If you're going to be with someone for more than 25 minutes, it's not going to do you one darn bit of good. Then we know that children are not good users of tight-fitting masks. We know that adults don't like it. People come up to the podium or want to speak and they want to take it off because they can't be understood. And so children have a difficult time learning and a difficult time understanding and being understood. And the thing that really bothers me is I don't know if you realize, and I just want the board to know, that there are children between ages 5 and 11 who do commit suicide. And I know we've lost kids in this district just in the last 9 months, to accidents, suicide, homicide. And so we've heard from some of our patrons that we have children who are really suffering from a lot of psychological anguish. And I just wanted to remind everyone that when children do go to commit suicide, it's hard to even talk about this. It's because of feelings of hopelessness and helplessness. It's not for attention. That's what it is. And this is what the fear of COVID is doing to them. It's making them have panic attacks and feel so much anguish. And so we have to really look at what the cost benefit is. Yes, it's a tool, but it's not. And what is this tool going to achieve? I totally get, choice, the community isn't, but what are we really trying to achieve? And I think I just wanted to bring the medical perspective that the end goal that we want is perhaps not going to be achieved. It'll make people feel better, but even Charles pointed out, I think that we would be exactly where we are whether the kids were masked or not masked, because we're seeing that with schools and communities that are masked or not masked. Omicron is moving through. And in some way, these kids can't be in this bubble. The younger you are, the sooner you get exposed to this less virulent version of this virus, you're set up for perhaps a better long-term, lifelong immunity. I do want to say, I've made a couple notes because I thought perhaps this discussion would come up, that if masking is deemed so important that we feel that it needs to be mandated, then I think it needs to be taken seriously. We can't just willy-nilly it. Some schools enforce it, some don't. It works between 8 and 3, but then at wrestling matches, at basketball games, it's all game, kids from different schools, hey, when you're at the same school, you can't even play with the kids from the other class, but then after hours, hey, you can all pack it in. I think that if this board comes to the point where we feel that we would like to make this mandate as a governing body, and certainly we have a legal leg to stand on should we go down that route as a governing body, I think we need to acknowledge that we also need to suspend our extracurricular activities that are not related to core academic subjects for the duration of the quote-unquote health emergency. I do want to have everybody kind of knock that around your head while we're thinking about this. And I do want to say that because vaccination is now available, as a physician, I feel that it does, in many ways, we have to educate the public. It negates the necessity for a mask mandate. I think that there are children who cannot get a vaccine. There are children who, despite having a vaccine, are asthmatics or who have respiratory issues, and they continue to be at risk. So to really get the objective of creating safety for all our kids, instead of coming up with this pretense of, hey, if you throw this cloth mask on, you're safe. Why don't we do it right and say, even if we're going to focus our energy on educating the public and saying, even if you're vaccinated, even if you're boosted, but if you have an underlying medical condition, we highly encourage you to wear an appropriate level mask. Now, granted, we're not putting KN95s on children because that would amount to child abuse, but certainly older kids and younger kids can wear a surgical mask because it is better than a cloth mask. You're looking at 10% versus 30%. You can certainly practice distancing. So I think to get the end game, which is the least amount of suffering and death in our children from all causes, we should focus on the right tools. And I think, as a physician, I think the right tools are a proper education and really trying to move away from this mass panic, anxiety. Everybody's running around freaking out over this. Well, those are my 2 cents. I'm sorry. I made it through despite the echo. Okay.
Thank you, Miriam, for your thoughts. Thank you.
Sorry, I was long-winded. I was Charles. Charles wasn't here, so I took his place.
I love it. Miriam, I want to go on record and say in many ways there are many things that you stated that I agree with.
It's really hard to hear you. Is there can I put it back up there? I've had to struggle. I'm trying to think and overcome this. Okay.
The feedback is hard. So I'm going to talk as slowly as I can to allow for the feedback. I want to go on record in saying that and there are many things that you stated that I agree with. If we as a board were to agree to do a mask mandate, one, I do believe it should be very temporary in order to address the surge that we have right now in our community, to mitigate as much as possible the surge. Also, I absolutely agree that we need to do a better job of what's the word I'm looking for? To make sure that it's being done well and right. And if we're going to do it, I agree. Do it wholly. Let's not have kids wear a mask from 8 to 3, and then at 3 o'clock say you can do whatever you want to. Let's go ahead and mandate it completely. So I agree that if we're going to do it, we need to do it fully, completely, and for a limited amount of time, just so that we can at least manage, not stop, but manage the spread of this virus, so that we can go back to learning in person, and that we can have teachers who are healthy, and we can maintain the number of days that our kids are getting educated and prevent as much of the spread as possible.
Thank you.
I agree. Yes, you said a lot of things that I agree with, and I think the end game, like you said, for all of us, is the safety of our students and staff and in-person learning.
Well, this time is to give feedback to Dr. Lathan and her team, and so are there any other comments or questions at this time from anyone? I don't even know where Charles went. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay. Okay, yeah.
Barely hear that.
No, I didn't know where you went. I just was making sure. Sorry, I didn't know. Okay, not Danielle. Denise has a comment, sorry.
I wonder if we should put him up there.
He can watch it online.
He can't participate if he watches online.
Yeah, Denise has a comment.
Yeah, the only that I just have to say is that it's very clear we've got a lot of reoccurring themes going tonight, and that is that everyone wants to do the right thing for kids. And I have had a lot of parents talk to me just recently, and what I'm hearing is kind of the same thing, is that many parents feel like, and what I have been told is that they feel they are the primary caregivers of their children. I've had more people tell me that recently, that they are the primary caregivers of their children, and at this point, they appreciate that we are recommending vaccines, they appreciate the opportunity for lunch, and they appreciate the option of masking, because they want that choice. And so I'm listening, and I'm hearing that we all, as board members, we want to do the right thing. I've heard that from several folks, and I know I feel the same way. And I just keep asking, what could someone tell us what that right thing is, and would that right person tell us that right thing? But we are experiencing something I've never seen in my lifetime, never seen in my years of education. And as I jokingly say, we did not get a lab manual to help us through this period of time. So I think we are all want to do the right thing for the right reasons, but what that is right now, I'm not sure. But I think that this next week of kids not in class and our teachers getting an opportunity to be healthy, and then when we come back, we'll provide more data, and as a board, we can gather. We always have the option for a special meeting and look at additional data and the recommendation of our superintendent and go from there. But I think this has been a great discussion. I've appreciated hearing from everyone as to what they have to say. But again, we're all looking for that right thing. I'm not sure what that is.
Thank you, Denise. Thank you. At this time, I will move us on in our agenda. Moving on to board policy. And we have one board policy adjustment. And there's first read and approval. First read and approval. There we go. Okay. And that the recommended action is that the board approve the policy as presented. Somebody willing to make that motion? Sharita will make the motion. Is there a second?
Second it.
Okay, Miriam will second it. Any discussion?
Yeah, I don't really understand this. Nothing is changing.
There's just
I'm confused.
A slight tweak. Does somebody want to speak to that?
So it was an error when MSB put out the policy. There was a small wording adjustment that needed to be made, so that's
Because I read it and it's the same thing, so.
Just, right.
Okay.
Just a couple words. Just a couple words.
Mm-hmm. All right.
Yeah, you're not missing anything. Yeah. Yep. Okay. I believe we're ready to vote.
We lost Charles. Are you voting yes?
No, we got it. He got it.
Okay.
We've moved him around so much.
Motion passes. Our next agenda item moves us to new business and the, hard to believe, the FY23 budget timeline process and current impacts.
All right, so it's this time of year that we kind of set the stage for what the budgeting process will look like. And for at least 3 of you, this will be your first go around. And so we're just going to kind of lay it out there. Here's what you can expect. And Ms. Stasel and I are going to tag team this tonight, with her doing most of the wrestling and me doing most of the observing. We'll kind of walk you through it. If you have questions, feel free to ask. And Kara, turn it over to you.
Awesome. So, good evening, board. It is my first time at the podium, and I'm hoping we've kind of had a heavy conversation tonight, so we're going to lighten the mood with the budget talk.
Who would have thought?
Yeah, budget.
Yay for budget.
So as Dr. Mulford mentioned, we are going to speak on the timeline, process, and current impacts of the budget for 22-23. Is this on? Awesome. So this is our budget process calendar. As you can see, currently we're January 2022. Hard to believe. Budget development has kicked off with budget managers. From January to June of 2022, the discussions with collective bargaining units do happen. From March to June of 2022, information sharing with and feedback from the Board of Education will be sought. And as Dr. Mulford kind of mentioned, the legislative session has kicked off, and then in mid-May, the legislative, let's say that 3 times fast, session will end on the state budget that could impact the formula. So we'll be keeping a close eye on those movements. And then in June, the budget will be presented to the board for consideration and approval. So the budget process and feedback. So again, the budget process has kicked off with our senior leaders and executive leaders. The senior leaders provide their needs to executive leaders through a number of conversations and meetings, and then executive leaders prioritize those needs and deliver those to the Board of Education for consideration, and then feedback is sought from the Board of Education on those prioritized needs. So here are our current year budget priorities. We do not expect a whole lot to change for the 22-23 school year, but we will be finalizing those in the coming weeks, and that'll be presented to the board in a future meeting. As you can see, so the 5 priorities are listed, and additionally, a primary core consideration for this current year were the COVID funds, the ESSER funds, and that will be a consideration moving into the next year as well. So current revenue impacts. As you may recall, we saw a $7 million decrease in local revenue due to the Blankenship versus Franklin County Court of Appeals decision, and that'll continue to impact us for several years. Luckily, we do have the ESSER funds to kind of help as that stopgap in the interim. At the state level, the FY23 foundation formula will be calculated on the highest 3 years average daily attendance. So you all have heard it before, but as a reminder, we do run off the highest 3. In the current year, we are running off of 1920. So that year will drop off next year, and we will run on either FY21, which I hope not, FY22 or 23. We're hoping to see FY23 come up so we can run off that year. As a primary calculation factor a primary calculation factor of the state foundation formula is enrollment and attendance. So if we see a decline in those numbers, we can see a decline in formula funding as well. So let's talk ESSER. So this table just kind of goes through a high-level overview of ESSER 1, 2, and 3. Deadline for obligations are listed as well, and the allocation. So you can see the total allocation for the district of ESSERs 1, 2, and 3, plus some other COVID-related grants, is over $100 million. ESSER 1 plus the other COVID-related grants, we have sought reimbursement for that total amount, so that's kind of reached its completion point. ESSER 2, we're in process right now. And then ESSER 3, as Dr. Mulford mentioned, we are awaiting appropriation at the state level for those. But we are moving forward with doing some allocation and things on those. So ESSER 2, FY22 budget included $27.3 million allocation for ESSER 2. And the allocation was budgeted as follows. You guys have seen this several times, and now we are providing that COVID financial statement as part of the Treasurer's report as well. ESSER 3 funds, the district received a $60.7 million allocation, and I think Dr. Lathan, it was in September that she provided those preliminary categories and amounts. Those are listed here as well. I'd like to point out 2 things. One, that per DESE requirements, 20% of this has to be reserved for learning loss and recovery of learning, and we have met that requirement in this allocation. And then the second thing I'd like to point out is that over 50% of this allocation is going towards staff supports and retention. So I think Dr. Mulford had mentioned that earlier.
Ms. Stacy, on our plan, we got final approval on our plan.
Yes, we did get final approval on our ESSER 3 budget and application in January. So the enrollment impact of COVID-19 is that. Charles. Hi, Charles. Back in a different format. So the table here shows 3 different years of the September count, the FY20 September count, 21 September count, and FY22 September count. From FY20 to FY21, as you recall, we lost about 1,500 students. From 21 to 22, we saw an increase of 295 students. We will continue to build FY23 projections around the recovery of more students. And again, the long-term financial impact is if we don't see that recovery of lost enrollment, we will see a reduction in state formula. You can't talk about enrollment without talking about the staffing plan. So for FY23, the leaders are evaluating their staffing needs. And of course, if there were to be some sort of reduction, attrition is our first step in balancing those position needs. The table below shows the early notifications of certificated staff that occur in January of each year. So you can see we're kind of in a wave pattern. FY19 was 59, FY20 72, FY21 back down to 53, and then FY22 we're up to 86. So out of those 86, 84 teachers and 2 administrators.
I would add to that, last year there was a general thought that we would see a lot of people leaving the profession. Across the state, that did not hold true. Matter of fact, more people held on. I think going into this year, though, it will probably be more normal, and it really hasn't been, and that's probably why you see the spike. I do believe that's what accounts for most of that.
Awesome. So the final slide for this evening is the Board of Education budget presentation schedule. So we will pick back up with our presentations March 22nd with our development introduction and overview. And then every month leading into June, we'll go over some funds, and we'll present to you at that time just a kind of overview of that fund, how it's doing in the current year, and then potentially the budget recommendation for FY23. So the slides presented could be the finalized recommendation, or we could still be finalizing the numbers. And then June 7th, the budget presentation will happen, and then June 21st, the budget will be presented to the Board of Education for consideration and approval.
And in between the March and the June, there will be individual meetings with board members also. So after we present publicly, just to follow up to make sure we're answering your questions. And so there will be meetings in between. I want you to think that we're not going to see you in between those times.
We had that last year, and it was really beneficial.
Yes, yes. Awesome. So any clarifications, feedback, comments, questions, concerns?
Can I go first? I'll be quick.
Yes, Miriam.
Can you repeat what you said? Because I really listened, but it just went by too fast. About the 86, the wave pattern. You said you think that's, even though it's a more normal year than last year, it reflects the upheaval of last year. Is that what you meant to say?
Pretty much got it, yeah. So there was an expectation last year that there would be a lot of people leaving the profession.
But that kind of...
Across the state, we saw a lot less vacancies than anticipated. Just from what I heard, I believe it was for 2 things. 1, stability. People really didn't know what the future held. But then 2, a lot of teachers who had taught for a long time didn't want to go out with the last year being their last year, right? They wanted a more normal year. So I heard that a lot, that I want to come back, I want to have a more normal year to end my career. We really haven't seen that a lot. So I think that's why it's higher, because some of those people probably would have retired last year or left last year, but hung on for various reasons.
Not for a normal year, but for various reasons.
For various reasons.
So would it be, I'm just trying to, us, and then you said the state, and you feeling that that's happening throughout the state? This
kind of what we're
wave
hearing.
going up? Okay. So this is a tough one to put you on the spot right now. Certainly feel free to get back with me later. To what extent do you think that 86 number would be attributed to the tiered system? Because I know that was difficult, not just for the parents, but also for the teachers, because many of them are parents. Do you think, I guess what I'm asking you, is there a disproportionate number of educators leaving that are in like the 3rd tier, because that was always the most difficult one in the surveys?
No.
No?
The
Okay.
short answer is no.
Okay, great.
I'm not going to say that the tier didn't drive some people to make the decision, but again, that's a trend we're seeing across the state. I'm sure the tiers played a role for some.
But you're not seeing a disproportionate number of tier 3. Okay, thank you.
Good question. Yeah. Danielle, and then Sharita.
I had a clarification and then a question. It goes back to something you said earlier, and I apologize, I was not paying very good attention. Did you say that the $60 million ESSER money, we're still waiting on the state to give that to us? That's correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so my question is, what happens to that money if it's not given?
And it goes back to the federal government and they redistribute it to other states.
So if the state of Missouri doesn't take it, it's going to go to the other 49 states?
Correct.
Thank you.
Pretty much. Okay, so my question is related. So the two big things that I heard, and I could be wrong, so I'm clarifying, that could affect our budget moving forward is the ESSER 3 funds and our state allocation based on average daily attendance. If those two things don't turn out as we would hope for them to turn out, that would have a huge impact on our 60 million plus the state allocation. Those two would be disrupted to our.
I would say huge is an understatement.
Okay, that's what I just wanted to make sure I was hearing correctly. Okay.
But would it be fair to say that we have new expenses that we didn't have before? Like the before and after school care is expanded because of the staffing shortages for busing, and it's been a domino effect.
But using COVID money.
But we've been using COVID money for it.
So if the domino, but.
Yes, it'll get out, yeah.
So we're hoping the dominoes that went down can then stand up, because we didn't always have the ESSER money.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm just saying though, for the budget moving forward, as we've planned it, it would have used, but ADA money still would have a big impact. And what would happen if we lost that money is that we have to get rid of some of those dominoes that were built up because of the last few years. But I understand that. I just wanted to make sure that I was hearing things correctly.
Good clarifying question. Scott, do you have a question?
Yeah,
Okay.
So what are the chances that they won't pass that? I know we have legislative platform and we're working with the legislators, but what's your gut?
I don't know that we have a good answer for that. I think the prevailing thought is that it will be appropriated. However, there are a good amount of legislators that, for whatever reason, don't want to accept the money or don't want to allocate the money to certain groups within the state. So those are the things they have to work through.
Okay.
Just as a reminder to the board, I know this was presented last year, but these ESSER funds need to be used for non-recurring costs.
Yeah.
And we've done the allocations around those things, right? So if this weren't to come to fruition, unfortunately, it would hurt some of the things we are currently doing that I think are great for kids, but there is a plan in place for those not to be recurring costs. So
But not for the state funds.
Not for state ADA, yeah. So again, that protection is in place for those 3 years, right? But it's been kind of a rough 3 years almost, so yeah.
And I would add to that we can use the ESSER 3 funds to help maintain current levels of staffing and operation. So the intent is to offset that Franklin County case for the next 2 to 3 years to buy us some time to adjust without having to make cuts, right? So that does really come into play. And then the ADA piece. And as you all know, 75 to 80% of our budget is staff. So if you have to make significant changes to the budget, there's no way to avoid it negatively impacting our people, whether that's staff reductions, salary freezes, whatever. And that's what we're hoping to avoid. And certainly the appropriation of the ESSER funds will allow us to avoid that, at least for a period of time.
In that Franklin decision, how many years do you think it'll take before it will even out on that, level off?
Yeah, it really depends on our local growth and any legislation that's passed.
To counteract that?
Correct. So there is legislation right now that would cap property value growth at 5%. And that would definitely hamper our ability to catch back up.
Catch back up, okay.
Right now, we're seeing a lot of growth, so we're optimistic within 3 to 5 years we can recover most of that.
3 to 5 years. That's what I was.
Now, that's just a guess. Just put that out there.
No, I'm writing it down and I'm holding you to it.
Thank you, John. Thank you, John and Kara. Any other questions before we move on with our agenda? Thank you for the overview of what's to come.
Thank you.
Our next agenda item is the Glendale roof replacement, and I believe that brings Travis to the podium. Good evening, Travis.
Good evening. Well, keeping in line with budget, I have an item for your consideration this evening. It's been quite a while since I brought something to you that exceeds that $500,000 limit, but that's why I'm bringing this to you as a separate agenda item. We've got about 40,000 square feet at the Glendale High School roof that is over the library, cafeteria, and boiler room that we've had leaks for a significant number of years, and so we've been able to fix those, but then we just continuously see problems, and so we went through a thorough investigation with the roof and found that we have what's called phenolic foam insulation, which is over the metal decking. And when this insulation gets wet, it creates a lot of acidic compounds and has a corrosive effect on the metal deck over long periods of time. And so because of this, we were able to take several samples to be able to see really what the damage has been done to the metal deck. And at a minimum, the entire deck in this particular area is going to need rust mitigation, and then we've got several hundred square feet that are going to need to be replaced or at least reinforced as part of this complete tear-off. Most of the time we don't need to do tear-offs on roofs because we can do overlays and take care of the aging roof. But this is a situation in this area that's become quite a problem. So due to current market conditions and lengthy lead times for materials, we felt that it was necessary to go through the Interlocal Purchasing System Cooperative Agreement, which is also known as TIPS. And this does meet all of the Missouri statute requirements for bidding and allows us to really expedite this process in order to get this moving forward, which is why we're coming to you now for this consideration. Reynolds Construction is the recommended roofing contractor for the project with a bid of $984,563.47. This will be paid for out of FY23 funds. In our capital budget, we allocate annually $1.5 million in roofing projects. Obviously, this is going to take up about 2/3 of that budget, but it's essential that we do it. And so we will start bringing to you early bid items, as you probably saw in the board update a couple weeks ago. And this is one of those items that we bring to you for your consideration so that our team can begin that planning process, procurement of materials, and be ready to complete a very extensive roofing project over the summer. So be happy to answer any questions. Yes.
Sharita, does that bid and cost cover the entire roof or just the sections over the cafeteria and the gym?
It covers the 40,000 square feet that I referenced. Yes.
Is that the entire roof?
No.
That's not the entire roof.
So that is just the section that you...
Just the 40,000 square feet, yes. So Glendale High School is approximately 200 plus thousand square feet.
That's under roof, not two.
Well, no, not that would be under roof. You're correct. There's 3 levels, so under roof, I don't know the exact number of that. We have all of that data that we keep.
So this 40,000 under roof isn't 40,000, it may be a smaller amount.
No, this is
Actually 40,000
yes.
of roof. Oh, okay.
Just out of curiosity, do you know what year that roof is?
I do not.
And do you think the rest of it is susceptible to the same sort of decking foam issue?
No, because we did inspect multiple areas.
So this was a breach in these areas, not a malfunction of the way it was put.
Right, and we've had other, for example, Sunshine Elementary, when we finished up that renovation project this summer, it had some sections of phenolic insulation as well, and we saw the same results. It was poor construction practice at the time, and so it's something that we definitely...
The rest of the phenolic insulation is still
as long as it doesn't get wet, it's okay. But when you have problems with leaks, then it begins to create this extensive issue that requires a tear-off and then more construction than you usually would have.
Scott.
Go ahead.
Yeah. Oh, I was just, because I'm not a roofer, thank God. Not because it's bad to be a roofer. I'm just saying I have no idea how to do any of that. Do we periodically replace parts of roofs? I'm just asking for a contextual question. Is this common to replace a part of a roof and not replace all of it?
It's not common to have to do a tear-off like this.
Okay.
Our practice has been over the last several years to do what's called a PVC overlay. We use a Duralast product or Sarnafil product. Those are the recommended products that we have in our specifications. And so primarily, that's how we like to treat roofs. But roofs on commercial buildings are just like roofs at home. You can only do that so many times. You can't just keep adding because the roofs are not built to sustain the kind of that weight. But when you do have damage underneath, then you have to do that. We had some sections at Hickory High School a couple years ago that was over a gymnasium area that we had to go in, and it was a very, very expensive project because we had to come in and do a tear off rather than just overlay, which we prefer to do.
Okay. And are these costs higher right now because of where we're at in our nation?
Everything's higher, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and roofing materials, particularly the insulation that goes with it, we've had delays on bond projects, so we've had to change to different products. And so lead times are significant when we do roofing projects.
Scott, then Sharita. Yep. Scott?
Okay, this is an accounting question. You said you normally have 1.5 million in the budget for roofing. How much is left in this year's budget? If we use any of that?
No, all of the dollars for this year we've allocated. We tried to allocate just about all of our roofing dollars in the spring so that the work can be done in the summer, because that's the ideal time for us to be able to finish it.
So we left this contract now, but how much is required to be paid to them now? But
not a lot.
I think so.
Not a lot. There will be some that we'll pay, but which we have plenty of money sitting in capital from this year, and we'll utilize those dollars. I don't know. Kara knows exactly what the 40 account fund reserve is, but it's significant.
So it could be less than 984,000 if you pay some out of the fiscal year 22 budget.
Well, we still pay that much money total, but
right. No, I understand that.
Yes.
But the way it reads, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
It said it'd be paid out of the FY23
It's an FY23 project, and the majority of it will be allocated out of next year's dollars.
Okay.
So my question is, you said that we generally have about $1.5 million in the budget for roofs per year. And with this project going up to such a high amount, what's the likelihood that we won't have money to do repairs on roofs like on an annual basis? Are we repairing roofs that have problems, or are we just doing it because we're maintaining our buildings?
So for several years prior to me being here, there wasn't a very good plan in place for roofs.
You knew capital projects were a bad thing
we
for a while.
have roofs that are 40 years old.
Right.
And so what we have now, after extensive work from our team, to put all of this information down on paper to see where we were and prioritize. Every year we go through and we prioritize exactly the roofs that we need to take care of. We don't have many issues like this. The majority of what we're dealing with now and have done over the last 4 years is we have our roofs that are at the oldest age that we need to replace, and we have a plan in place now for future leaders down the road that we are being able to replace all of our roofs once that warranty reaches its end life, and we're not dealing with 40-year-old roofs, but we're dealing with 25-year-old roofs. So,
all very good questions. We're all learning about this expenditure.
I'm not a roofer either, Alina.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Thank you.
We have good people on our team that are, though.
That's right, that's right. But we are looking at a big expense, so these are all very valid and important questions to educate all of us as we consider this tonight. Any other questions for Travis before I read the recommended action?
Just another quick question. So it sounds like we took care of Kickapoo, now Glendale, Hillcrest had remodeled.
We took care of a section of it.
Well, we'll just for now. And then Hillcrest.
High schools are old, don't
So
remember that.
and Hillcrest, I'm assuming much of it got, or not much of it. Oh yeah, probably.
The roof's been taken care of.
So we just have Central and Parkview.
We did a lot of roofing in the last 2 years at Central.
Okay, and I'm only focusing on those because they're the largest ones. And so just Parkview. So we're probably, after this big expenditure, we're sitting okay, or is Parkview like?
Well, it'll be somewhere in the rotation. There's parts of Parkview that the roofs have been taken care of. There's some that will need to be done. We've done
So
some
we're not in
over
the
the
clear.
gymnasium recently.
Just trying to get a vision of the next couple. Okay.
We got too many buildings, too old of roofs. Is that what you're saying?
Over
Travis?
4 million square feet.
Too many old buildings.
I have one
Danielle.
question. So the leak has occurred for several years. My question is, why now? Why is this coming before us?
Well, because we continuously had a particular roofing contractor that did that work that would come in and
Repair.
supposedly fix or Band-Aid, and it would stop, but then it would happen, it would stop, and it would happen. And we were finally needed to go to that next step and get a different roofer in to do the investigation that's extremely knowledgeable and be able to show us what we were dealing with so we could make the best decision moving forward. So great question.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and read the recommended action is that the board approve the construction contract as presented, and it is spelled out underneath there. It's not actually an attached contract there. So would somebody be willing to make that motion?
Okay.
Scott will make the motion. Denise will second it. Any other discussion before we vote? Okay, seeing none, we are ready to vote.
Oh, okay. Charles is on the podium now.
We're going to add this to the bingo cards.
Are you yes, Charles?
Where's Charles?
Charles, where's Charles?
Oh, he's voting. He's fine. He voted on the computer. He's fine. He's fine.
He's on the podium now.
Okay.
I want Charles.
We're getting smaller.
Let's bring Charles over here.
He's getting smaller. Oh, we have to laugh.
Okay.
Early chocolate.
He'll never not come to the board
Really
meeting.
Steve moves it back.
Because he can't hear John. Motion passes. Motion passes. Our next agenda item is the resolution for COVID leave, and that brings Dr. Mulford. It's just, might as well pull your chair up to the podium tonight, huh?
All right, well, as you all are aware, at the start of the school year, the board approved a resolution that went through the end of December that provided 5 additional COVID leave days for employees. It technically expired the end of December. We are asking the board to extend that resolution, making it retroactive to January 1, and extend that through the end of June. There are a couple of minor amendments to the resolution, so if you go down to the bottom of the first page, in the prior resolution, the 5 days could be used for quarantine, but as you all are aware, in Missouri, we no longer have a quarantine for exposure, so that is gone. What it is for when an employee is positive, or they're having to take care of a child who is positive. We did change the language for the child. So previously it said a child under the age of 18. That language now says birth through 8th grade, with the general understanding that most high school students do not need the parent to be at home with them. We also recognize that there are exceptions to the rule, and we're always going to take care of our people should one of those exceptions present themselves. We did also offer clarification in the resolution that if a person has tested for COVID and is awaiting results, that they could use the leave. So that was not clear in the prior resolution. And then, of course, as we have done throughout, if a person is at home, is positive, or is at home with a positive child, but is able to teach remotely, they feel well enough to do so, and we allow them to do so without having to use any leave at all. We get a substitute for the classroom to manage the classroom, and then the teacher joins in and provides the instruction. So with that said, we'll be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you for those comments to explain. And any questions for Dr. Mulford at this time? Scott?
Seems like it's taken a lot of time and days to get test results, you know. And then if you cut back out, you have to quarantine for 5 days, right? 5 days enough.
Yeah, so I think it depends on the situation, right? And this is a conversation we went back and forth on. You have someone who's positive, and then a few weeks later, let's say they have a child who's positive that they have to stay home with. So there's certainly a balance we're trying to strike. And I would say don't forget that we provide annual sick leave. And if someone has been here more than a year, they're going to likely have built up sick leave beyond just the 1 year allocation. There's a reason for that sick leave, right? It's for when you're sick or having to care for a family member. So I think that's our challenge, is how do we balance providing the additional support we know our staff need, while at the same time not discouraging proper self-awareness and self-preservation, for lack of a better word. So, we want people to get vaccinated. We know that's going to reduce their time out. We want people to take COVID precautions. We know it's going to reduce their time out. But if you have an unlimited amount of leave or a really large amount of leave, then sometimes people feel like maybe they don't have to be as cautious as they otherwise would. I don't have a great answer. I'm not saying 5 is the right number, Scott.
Okay.
But it's just, we're just asking to extend what we already had in place.
I have a question.
Danielle.
I know that you made a change so that if an employee is waiting on COVID test results, they are allowed to use these 5 days. If an employee's child or dependent is waiting on test results, can they use their 5 days?
We didn't spell that out in there, but again, we would say if they're having to care for a child due to COVID-related reasons, then we would allow that to apply.
Right, and right now it says only if an employee's child or dependent is COVID positive.
Yeah, so maybe we need to add that same language, or awaiting test results.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
I would like to make that motion then.
Okay, where are we at?
So we're on the first page there under.
You're trying to make B, you can just sound similar to A. You want the wording on B.
Right, so section B would.
You don't have to make a motion.
You just gotta
They can
edit it.
Tell them to
Just
edit
edit
it.
Good deal, thank you.
Edit change.
Yep.
So, or waiting test results, right, okay. So we'll make that change.
Before the "and" the employee is unavailable, you put "or awaiting results."
Yes.
That's where you plug it in.
Yeah, that's good.
Can we still vote on this, though?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
I would also tell you that, is Laura back here? Yeah, there she is. Laura and I had a conversation this afternoon around, let's say we have to flip a building to virtual, okay? And I work at Kickapoo, my kid goes to Wanda Gray, and Wanda Gray flips to virtual, but I'm still teaching over here and I have nobody to care for my kid. Can I use the sleep? Well, the way the resolution is currently, the answer is no. Okay, but the reason the answer is no is I want you to kind of think, why would we go virtual? We would go virtual because we don't have enough staff. So if we then allow people in other buildings to teach remotely, and we have to get them a sub, and that defeats the whole point of why we flipped that building or buildings to virtual, right? Now that said, as we have said from the get-go, we are committed to taking care of people. So if there's a rare situation that comes up that puts someone in a hardship because of us flipping a school to virtual, then we will do everything we can to find the solution. Now, we are optimistic that we're going to hit this peak about next week, according to the health department, and what they're seeing in other cities is a sharp decline pretty quickly. And we're hopeful that over the next 2-3 weeks we're going to be out of the woods. No one can predict that, but cross our fingers.
Thank you. Okay, we've got an edit there that will be made, and the recommended action is that the board approve the COVID-19 resolution as presented.
I will make that motion.
Denise will make the motion, Miriam will second it. Any discussion? Seeing no other discussion, we're ready to vote.
And if you don't mind me saying, I really want to brag on Laura. The last couple of weeks, just her accessibility and conversations, I think have been really, really good. So Laura, I just want to say publicly that I appreciate that. So, all right.
Thank you. Motion passes. Our next agenda item brings Dr. Shaw back up to the podium, which is our bond project updates and actions.
So standard report for you this evening. The large majority of what you're going to see are items that come out of our FF&E, which is our equipment budget. So these are all things that have already been budgeted for. It's not additions to, which is great news. But I do want to highlight, as we begin to get real close to closing out Williams, we are seeing a $466,527.58 deduct from that project because of unused allowances and unused contingency within that GMP. The great thing about that is, and the celebration, is that we all remember that this was originally to be a renovation project, and we did make that change, and almost over 90% of it became new construction, and we're going to be able to finish this project within that renovation budget. So that's a great celebration for the contractors and for the team that has worked diligently to get this project completed. So great celebration. So before you tonight is a recommended change order of a net deduct of $50,578.39 from bond.
Okay, excellent. Any questions for Travis at this time? Seeing none, the recommended action is that the board approves the change orders and agreements as presented. Okay, I saw Sharita's hand. Sharita will make the motion. Scott will second it. Any discussion? Seeing none, we are ready to vote.
Better than my computer. He's there.
Motion passes. Our next agenda item is our superintendent update.
Thank you. Last week I had the opportunity to surprise a Parkview High School teacher on Teacher Proud Tuesday. This is an informal recognition we do each month in collaboration with Go CSD. I dropped in on Dee Dee Moore, who has been a teacher and DECA advisor for more than 20 years. Recently she was nominated for the National Life Changer of the Year Award. So once again, congratulations to Dee Dee Moore. The date has been set for our next SPS University. It will be held on March the 29th at Kickapoo High School. Next week, we will send out a save the date notice to parents along with a thought exchange invitation to share what workshops they would like to offer. Thank you again to all the board members for your participation, to our parents, community, and staff members for your outstanding presentations at our December launch. We're currently accepting nominations for the 22-23 Teacher of the Year. To be eligible, a teacher must have 4 or more years of teaching experience with SPS. I know we have a number of great teachers on Team SPS. If there's one you would like to nominate, go to sps.org and submit your nomination by 4:30 p.m. January 31st. So these next 3 days while you're at home, submit those nominations, all right? Thank you again. I want to recognize Josh Scott and Dr. Michaels from our athletics department and their entire team for an outstanding Bass Pro Tournament of Champions. It was an exciting weekend. I think all of our visitors, our staff members, everyone had a good time. I learned how to judge a slam dunk contest and not to give out lower scores. So I think at the end my booze had dropped down tremendously. But it was a fun event. And finally, on yesterday, we had the opportunity to honor the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. with a number of activities throughout Springfield. The superintendent's cabinet, along with SPS staff and leadership, participated in the annual march. During the program which followed, winners of the essay contest sponsored by the NAACP were announced, including 3 SPS middle school students representing Central High School, Cherokee, and Pershing Middle School. We will invite them to our February board meeting for formal recognition. That concludes my updates.
Excellent. Great. Our legislative update.
Yes, board members, in your packet was an update from our legislative consultant. Please let me know if you have any questions or comments or concerns. But the session kicked off, and I believe next week we will journey, those of you who have signed up, we'll go to Jefferson City for a legislative reception. And you've received email communication about that. So you're looking at me a little lost.
Too late to go?
I'm sure it's not too late. I'm sure if you gas up that car, it would not be too late to go. So,
all right.
Do you want to go? The sooner you email me, the better, because I am getting emails from them. I've got to get that list from them. So
Okay. Yes, thank you. I'll let you know as soon as possible.
Okay, so if you want to go, please let Tammy know. It's next Wednesday. I think it's next Wednesday, isn't it? Leaving at noon. Wednesday. And actually, I will actually be going up a little bit earlier to meet with some of our elected officials.
All right, thank you. That takes us to our next agenda item, which is board comments. Any additional board comments at this time?
I have a quick.
Okay.
John, I know I said this before, but I want to reiterate that I really appreciate the district's accessibility and availability, because there are many issues and many concerns and questions we have amidst the incredible staffing shortages and the challenges that you've had with the holiday Monday. I just have to give you another shout out.
Thank you, Miriam. Any other board comments at this time? Okay. Our upcoming meetings, we have, we're back to 2 meetings in February. February 1st is our BOE study session. February 15th is our BOE regular scheduled meeting. That takes us to our plus delta. If there's any plus deltas that you want to put on the Post-it notes and give those to Tammy, we're always looking to improve our sessions. We do need to go into executive session, so I will read that recommended action. The recommended action is that the board meet in executive session following this meeting to discuss legal, real estate, and personnel matters as provided in sections 610.021, subsections 1, 2, 3, and 13 of the revised statute of Missouri. Would somebody be willing to make that motion? Danielle will make the motion. Sharita will second it. Any discussion? Seeing none, we're ready to vote. Motion passes. Thank you for those who joined us in our main session tonight.